If you're not 100% certain you sound like a real man when you talk, you don't.
But you're in luck, because in today's video, I'm gonna give you 3 specific techniques you can implement immediately to sound like a real man, to command attention, to demand respect when you speak.
Hey, I want to be sure you get your chance to download your free power tonality checklist, even if you don't make it to the end of the video. So you can click or touch right here in the upper right-hand corner. Download yours now, and I'll talk to you more about what it is at the end.
When it comes to sounding like a man when you talk, most guys assume it has to do with how deep your voice is and how loud you can talk and the deepness of the resonance behind the words. And while these components do have an impact, there's a lot to be said for your nonverbals and other variables that go into this. The first strategy I'm going to go through pertains specifically to this, and that's that you want to stand behind your words with your body language. A lot of guys, when they first start talking, they kind of slunch over and they kind of step back. Even if when they were listening to other people, they've got a little more loose body language, now it's their time to talk, and they're kind of like this. It communicates to people that you're not confident in what you're saying, that you don't really stand behind what you're saying. If someone is a manager or a boss or just a leader and they're trying to convince you of something, if they can't even stand up and be strong when they're talking, how can you believe them? It looks like they're not confident in their own words. So we need to be sure when we deliver the things we say, however we do it, that we stand behind them with a strong body language that is indicative that you're 100% confident in what you're saying. It's almost a bit, you've heard the term an honest signal before. It just means something that's hardwired in us, that's very hard to fake. And when we say something that we're not completely confident in, our body language naturally gets a little more tentative. Our voice naturally doesn't project as much. It's just something we're hardwired to do. So be sure that a lot of guys that I see, even when they are confident what they're saying, they're giving these honest signals that they're not. So we need to become very aware of the fact that we either are or aren't standing behind what we're saying when it comes to the way that other people are perceiving us. Number 2, I get a lot of guys who come to me for vocal coaching or advice who say, I just wasn't born with a very deep voice. There's nothing I can do about it. And I tell them that the God-given voice that you were given has a very little overall impact on the way that your voice is perceived. So a lot of times when I ask them to talk, the problem is not the strength of their voice. The problem is they're afraid to be heard. Even if they had the voice of Earl Jones, the strongest voice ever, if you're afraid to be heard, it's not going to come across well and people aren't going to think you have a strong voice. Whereas if you have a weak voice, you're born with a weak voice, maybe it's a little higher, maybe it doesn't have a lot of strong resonance. If you're not afraid to be heard, you're going to communicate in a way that people see you as having a stronger voice. You can tell when people are out in public if they're afraid to be heard or not, because we know, everyone knows the specific resonance of our voice that carries. We learned at the schoolyard when we were yelling at people, how do people hear us the most? How can we talk quiet so the teacher can't hear us? At a very young age, we become aware of this. And so many guys don't realize their subconscious is holding them back from speaking with a strong voice because they're afraid to be heard. So the second thing we need to do is get in our head and say, hey, are we talking with a weak tone of voice because we're afraid to be heard? If that is the case, we need to get over that hitch so we can use the fullness of our voice and not be afraid to be heard and deliver our communication in a way that is strong and tells people, I'm confident in this environment. If someone's standing behind me, here's what I'm saying, that's fine. I'm confident in what I'm saying, no big deal, as opposed to, yeah, always looking over, worried if he can hear you. I was actually out there last weekend. You can have the strongest voice in the world and it's still going to come across as a weak voice. You can't be afraid to be heard. Number 3 makes me sick when I see guys that don't practice this. It's so disgusting when you see guys who want so bad to be seen as strong men, to sound like a man, to lead people. They're in sports teams. Like, why do people not look at me as a leader? And you hear their tonality. Their tonality is supplicative. There's 3 kinds of tonality: supplicative, neutral, and rapport breaking. Supplicative is the kind, hi, how are you today? And all it's communicating is you put the other person you're talking to on a pedestal. You see them as so much higher value, you can't give them any chance to get mad at you because you're so nice. How was your weekend? You can't be mad at me because I put you up here. How could you be mad at someone who would never offend you? That's what it's communicating. Guys don't realize this. So many people, men and women, think they're communicating more with a rapport neutral tonality, when in actuality they're using a supplicative tonality, which is telling the other person to treat you as lower than they are. The minute that that tone comes out of your mouth, it's completely turning the interaction in a direction that you don't want it, where you're setting yourself up in a frame where they're higher than you and you're lower. You have to become aware of this. Now, there's so much to be said for tonality and using the right tone of voice. I actually put together a free tonality power checklist. You can click up here to download if you're on a PC, or you can touch it if you're on your phone, or you can just go to Charisma Matrix /tonality and download the free PDF checklist. It's going to go through a bunch of things that you probably aren't aware of that you can get keyed up in your mind, because once your subconscious becomes aware of what's going on and aware, okay, wait, I read in this tonality checklist that when you do this, people behave differently. You try it and you see people are behaving differently. A lot of times that's all you need to get you on a strong foot, to get you that strong tonality. So you can either go to charismamatrix.com /tonality or touch up here to download your copy. There's 3 things you can do on the screen. You can click here if you haven't downloaded your free tonality checklist. You can click up here if you want to go to another video that YouTube thinks you'd really enjoy, or if you're crazy enough and haven't subscribed yet, click right down there to subscribe to the channel. I'll talk to you soon.